Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How is that rhetoric night class you have been taking?
It is so interesting. Right now we are learning about a man named Kenneth Burke.
Who is Kenneth Burke? I have never heard of him.
There is so much to tell. I don't know where to start.
Well, where is he from? Was he ever married?
That's easy. Kenneth Burke was born on May 5, 1987 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He dropped out of college twice from both Ohio State and Columbia because he preferred to study and write his own way instead of feeling constricted. In 1919, Burke married Lillian Batterham, with whom he had 3 daughters. In 1933 he divorced Lillian and married her sister, Elizabeth, with whom he had 2 sons.
Wow. Quite the ladies' man, I see.
Well, his relationships with women were nothing compared to those of the men that Burke based some of his ideologies off of, Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud. Burke was always interested in poetry, music, and literature, but early on he turned theoretical and began to explore ways in which poetry and criticism could explain human relations in general.
That's pretty interesting. What do you mean by human relations?
Well, let me begin by telling you how, in a series of major works, Burke began to explore literature not only as a potential social influence and reflection of social attitudes, but as a model of the structure of human action. Burke said that human action is essentially symbolic action, shaped and motivated as if it were drama. Therefore, he started using the term dramatism to describe a way of studying human motivation. The key to dramatism is that human action is free and purposeful, as opposed to motion, which is simply the physical movement of objects. Humans act, said Burke, and objects move.
That makes sense. But what else shapes our social influences besides literature?
Burke thought that many things influence us, such as religion, family, location, education, tastes, past experiences, and the culture we live in. These influences also play a huge role in shaping our deterministic screens.
What in the world is a deterministic screen?
Deterministic screens are basically the way that people view the same thing or situation differently, based on our own social influences that I just told you about. Burke once provided a simple example of this when describing how he once saw several different photographs of the exact same subject, but each photograph was made with different color filters. So even though a photograph is supposed to be reflecting truth, these photographs all appear different. It's a metaphor for how different people see the same thing differently. Does that make any sense?
So basically what Burke is saying when talking about deterministic screens is that, for example, because I grew up on the farm raising animals and you grew up in the city, when we go to the grocery store to buy eggs, we both have a different view, idea, or understanding about how the eggs were produced, purely because I have seen it firsthand and you have not. So our varying ideas about buying eggs are based on our individual experiences and ultimately our deterministic screens. Is that correct?
Precisely. You're a fast learner. You just have to keep in mind that Burke believes that our deterministic screens literally shape how we view everything in the world around us. One more easy example of deterministic screens would be the word party. If you say party to 10 different people, each person will have their own unique thought about the meaning of that word based on their social influences. For example, when hearing the word party, a college student might think of a crazy frat party while a middle-aged mom might think of a quiet cheese and wine book club party. Burke also had another main concept when discussing deterministic screens that dealt with reflecting, selecting, and deflecting reality.
Okay. Now I am all confused again.
Let me explain. Burke believed that through our own deterministic screens, we reflect the reality that we believe exists. Then we select by focusing on only parts of reality that we are interested in. And then we deflect when we ignore other parts of reality that we are not interested in. Reflecting, selecting, and deflecting are all about the ways in which we view reality, and because of this, our deterministic screens act as filters for how we view things. Burke believes that our deterministic screens are essentially reflections of ourselves and therefore shape how we act and see the world.
Okay. I understand now. So since you are learning about this in rhetoric class, How does Kenneth Burke directly relate to rhetoric?
Burke wrote that rhetoric is the key to any study of the human condition, defining rhetoric as the use of language as a symbolic means of inducing cooperation in beings that by nature respond to symbols. He thought that rhetoric preserves or alters social order by influencing the way people perceive their symbolic relations. Although rhetoric is historically rooted in language, Burke extended its operation to any human activity in which meaning could be found in both language and actions. Burke also said, "Wherever there is persuasion, there's rhetoric. And wherever there is meaning, there is persuasion."
That's pretty interesting and seems to make a lot of sense. So besides the concept of terministic screens, what else is Burke known for?
Burke is definitely given a lot of recognition for his pented. You see, Burke realized that many speakers are successful due to their ability to use dramatic techniques in their own rhetoric. However, there is a modern separation of rhetoric and drama, and Burke decided that these two must be related. Therefore, he created the pented, which he published in 1945. The pented contains 5 key terms, which are act, actor, agency, scene, and purpose. These terms are based on the well-known 5 standard questions of who, what, when, where, and why. As Burke displayed in his pented, the actor represented the question of who, the act represented what, the scene represented where or when, the purpose represented the why, and the agency represented the how. When describing his pented, Burke once said that each of the constituents of his pented was like the wake of one of 5 speedboats heading across the water. He said that the most interesting analysis occurred when the so-called wakes crossed each other. Burke used his pented as a means to describe how one can use the best possible rhetoric in order to convey their message in the best way possible. He also used the pented to describe why we as humans do the things that we do.
Okay, that is starting to make sense. I guess I see the whole thing differently because of our terministic screens, because you are in a rhetoric class and I have never taken rhetoric before.
Wow. Way to use the term perfectly. But yes, unfortunately a lot of Burke's concepts can get confusing. For the best explanation, you should ask my teacher, Natalie. She is the best of the best.
I remember you said that Burke based a lot of his ideas off of Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud. What were some of the basic ideas that he took from these men?
He based a large amount of his ideologies off of Marx and Freud, but I will try to give you the most simple explanations. Much of Burke's interest into the human psyche came from the work of Freud. He agreed with Freud that humans have unconscious elements that we cannot predict or control without the help of others, and that we, as humans, can only discover our authentic sense of self in psychoanalysis and realizing that pieces of the unconscious often appear within our dreams, in word associations, symbology, and through Freudian slips. Burke was also very interested in Karl Marx's ideas about history. Burke agreed with Marx about humans generally being held down by false consciousness that was the result of inauthentic ideologies. However, they did differ because Marx thought that the truth would set one free and Burke was more hesitant about adopting that exact ideology. So essentially, Burke relied on the psychological insights of Freud and the dialectical approach of Marx to form his own ideas.
So the absolute easiest way to sum up Burke's main interest is to say that he wanted to focus on how the human mind worked unconsciously?
If you had to break it down that simply, then yes. That is correct.
Wow. Thanks so much for all of this information. I guess now that I have been so informed, I have almost a different terministic screen than I had before we started talking.
Probably. Well, I better get back to work now. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks again.